In 2006, a film called Open Season was released. An animated film about a bear who learns to be friends with some forest animals, and they all learn to live together in peace. It was a decent movie and made enough money at the box office to warrant a sequel which came out just 4 years later. But this is not a video about that. This is a video about something that happened in between these two movies, something that changed the lives of all the animals in the forest forever. In this installment of the series, our old friend Boog is minding his own business one day in the forest when he sees something strange. He's never seen anything like it before. In fact, no animal in the forest has ever seen anything like it before. They soon learned that what they were looking at was a young girl who had fallen down a hill and landed right outside of their forest. She was unconscious and didn't seem to be breathing. At first, Boog wanted to run away. After all, humans are the reason that he and all the other animals have to spend their days hiding in the forest. But seeing that she was hurt, he couldn't bring himself to do it. Instead, he ran over to her and nudged her with his big furry nose. No, just because she wasn't breathing, it didn't mean that she was dead. She was simply knocked out cold from the fall. And Boog knew that if he could get her to a hospital, she would make a full recovery. But how do you get a big, scary human to a hospital without the other animals panicking? Well, Boog came up with a plan. He gathered all of his forest friends, told them what had happened, and said that he needed their help to get her to safety. Luckily, they all agreed, even though they were terrified. The problem was that even though none of the animals were afraid of this one human, they were still afraid of all the other humans that lived in the nearby town. And so they had to come up with a way to get her to the road without being seen. It wasn't easy, but after many failed attempts, they finally managed to get her onto the highway. Then the problem became, how do you transport a human without anyone seeing you? The solution came when Stella, a deer who was part of the gang, suggested they use the forest train tracks. There was an old train engine that hadn't moved in decades, but it would be perfect for transporting the girl. And so the animals did just that. They loaded her onto the train car and then began pushing it along the tracks towards the nearest hospital. It took a while, but eventually they reached the emergency room doors where they left her and ran away as fast as they could. As the minutes passed by, they began to calm down and relaxed a little bit. That is until they heard police sirens. Oh no, they thought, they're going to find us. But then they saw that the police weren't coming for them. They were actually there for the girl. She had made a full recovery, and the police were there to question whoever had brought her to the hospital. Boog and the other animals were scared, but they had done what they thought was best. There was no way that they were going to let her die, so they had no regrets. But that didn't stop them from panicking when they realized that someone was looking for the girl. And when I say someone, I mean a very specific someone. It was the girl's father who had been searching for her since she disappeared. He was devastated when he found out that she had been missing for so long, and now he was looking for whoever had taken her. When he heard that a group of animals had saved his daughter's life, he was shocked. He didn't know that such a thing was possible, but he was also scared. He was worried that these animals would hurt his daughter again. She assured him that they wouldn't. She had only good things to say about them. And so her father decided to meet them and thank them in person. This meeting went better than anyone could have imagined. Her father was so grateful to these animals for saving his daughter's life that he gave each and every one of them a huge bag of food. Of course, this included Boog, who was very happy with his share. But as he was taking the food back to his house, he tripped and dropped a bag full of apples. Now, normally, he wouldn't have minded. After all, it was just a bag of apples. But these weren't just any apples. These were magical apples. You see, this young girl hadn't fallen off a hill by accident. She had been pushed by her father. See, he wasn't a good man. In fact, he was quite the opposite. He was abusive towards his wife and daughter. And one day he got fed up with his daughter's whining and pushed her over the hill. He thought for sure that she would fall to her death, at which point he would take her mother and move to a different city, start a new life. But he had miscalculated. She had survived, but he hadn't known that until now. When he realized what kind of apples these were, he knew that he was in trouble. You see, magical apples grow on trees deep inside the forest. And if any non-magical creature eats more than one, they will turn into that creature. For example, if a human ate more than one magical apple, they would turn into a human-animal hybrid. And those hybrids are some of the most powerful creatures that exist. If you didn't stop Boog from eating the apples, then he would become one of these hybrid creatures. Even worse, he would become a servant to the creature that ate the most apples. He tried to warn Boog, but the bear just didn't listen. He was too busy stuffing his face with the delicious fruit. But when the time came and Boog didn't turn into a hybrid, he realized that the apples weren't magical. He felt terrible about this. But it didn't change the fact that he had eaten all of the apples, and the man was still afraid that he would turn into a monster. But Boog knew that this couldn't happen. These apples were special. Sure, if a human ate them, they would become a hybrid, but animals can't eat magical fruit and turn into a different species. That would make no sense whatsoever. So Boog continued to reassure the man that nothing would happen to him, but the man didn't believe him. He thought that Boog was just saying that so he wouldn't turn on him. So the man decided to leave before whatever side effects would kick in. But as he was walking away, he turned back to look at Boog one last time, and what he saw shocked him. Boog's fur was beginning to fade away, leaving behind a pale white skin. His snout and ears were elongating. His eyes were turning yellow, and his hands and feet were developing opposable thumbs. Right before his eyes, Boog was turning into a human. And not just any human, but a young boy. The man couldn't believe what he was seeing. Could it be that animals can turn into humans after all? He had to do some research. After talking to some people in town, he learned that it was possible, but only under one condition. When an animal eats a magical fruit, it doesn't turn into a random animal. It turns into the person who gave them the fruit. In this case, that would be him. He had given Boog the fruit, and now Boog was turning into him. This meant that whatever happened to him would now happen to Boog. And as he looked at the forest, he saw that it was burning to the ground. Someone had set it on fire. If he didn't do something, Boog would burn to death along with all of the animals. So he charged into the forest, grabbed all of the animals, and led them out to safety. Once they were all out, he returned to the fire and watched as it consumed everything that he had ever known. He didn't know what to do next, so he sat down on a nearby log and cried. All of this was his fault. He was the reason that the forest was gone. But then he felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned around to see Boog, who was now a fully grown boy. He didn't remember anything that had happened to him, but he did remember the man who had given him the fruit. And when Boog looked at him, he didn't feel any anger or resentment. Instead, he felt pity. He could tell that this man was hurting, and that was enough for him. Boog approached the man and asked him if he could do anything to help. The man looked up and was surprised to see that the bear that he had tormented for so long was now a human boy who wanted to help him. It broke his heart. He had treated this bear horribly, and now he was asking him if he could help. How could he ever repay him for all of the torment that he caused him? He couldn't. But that didn't stop him from trying. He explained to Boog what had happened and begged him to forgive him. Boog didn't hesitate. He knew that this man needed help and he was more than willing to give it. But that's not to say that it was easy. It took a lot of time and effort to rebuild the forest, but Boog and the other animals didn't mind. They were happy to do it because it made the man happy, and that was all that mattered. In the end, the forest was restored and everyone was happy. Boog was happy because he had made a new friend. The man was happy because he was no longer haunted by the past, and all the animals were happy because they had a new home. As for the apples, well, they disappeared after the fire, which was probably for the best.